When Walter White's battered Pontiac Aztek first rolled onto our screens, few could have predicted it would become one of television's most iconic vehicles. This notoriously ugly crossover, widely mocked as one of the worst cars ever made, somehow transformed into a symbol of American pop culture and even sparked a real-world sales revival. From its custom paint job that never existed in real life to a tragic NASCAR connection, the story behind Breaking Bad's Aztek is stranger than fiction. Here are 15 weird facts you didn't know about Breaking Bad's Pontiac Aztek. Fact 1. Custom paint job never existed. When you watch Breaking Bad, one of the first things you notice about Walter White's car is its distinctly unimpressive color, a sort of dull, faded greenish beige that perfectly captures his underwhelming life as a struggling high school chemistry teacher. What most viewers don't realize is that this particular shade never actually existed on any real Pontiac Aztek that rolled off the assembly line. Series creator Vince Gilligan specifically commissioned a custom paint job for the show's production vehicles, creating what the show's transportation coordinator, Dennis Milliken, described as a unique gray-beige green tone that Pontiac had never offered to customers. This wasn't just a random choice or a happy accident during production. Gilligan deliberately selected this non-factory color to serve as a visual metaphor for Walter White's character at the beginning of the series. The faded, indistinct hue was meant to symbolize Walt's bland, colorless existence, a man who had settled for mediocrity and whose dreams had faded like old paint in the desert sun. According to interviews with the show's production team, Gilligan was presented with several vehicle options for Walter's character, but he fell in love with the idea of his Mr. Chips character driving around Albuquerque in this particular sad-looking Aztek. The custom color choice ties directly into Gilligan's sophisticated use of color theory throughout Breaking Bad, where every character is associated with specific colors that reflect their personality and moral journey. Walter White's character is represented by the color green, which in the show symbolizes greed and money. But at the beginning of the series, he also wears a lot of beige clothing, representing his boring, unremarkable life. The Aztek's custom paint job bridges these two colors, creating a faded greenish beige that shows Walter trapped between his dull present and the dangerous, money-driven future he's about to enter. Even the car itself becomes a character study painted onto 4 wheels. Fact 2. Sold for just $50. On screen. In one of the most symbolically loaded moments of Breaking Bad, Walter White sells his battered Pontiac Aztek to his mechanic for just $50 in the Season 5 episode, titled 51. What makes this scene particularly striking is that Walt had literally just picked up the car after paying to have it repaired yet again, and the mechanic even tells him the Aztek still has a couple 100,000 miles left in it. But Walt doesn't care about practicality anymore. The moment he sees his black Heisenberg hat sitting on the passenger seat, he impulsively offers to sell the entire car to the mechanic named Benny for $100, then immediately drops the price to $50 when Benny hesitates for just a second. This wasn't just Walter getting rid of an old car. Throughout the series, that Aztek had been through absolute hell, surviving airplane debris raining down on it, having its windshield smashed by Jesse throwing a chunk of cement through it, getting its front end destroyed when Walt used it to run over 2 drug dealers to save Jesse's life, and finally getting T-boned when Walt intentionally steered into oncoming traffic to avoid taking Hank to the laundry where the meth lab was hidden. Every single time, Walt had the car repaired and kept driving it. The Aztek represented his connection to his old life as a struggling chemistry teacher and family man. But by Season 5, Walter White was gone, and only Heisenberg remained. Selling the Aztek for essentially nothing was Walter discarding the last physical remnant of who he used to be. He immediately replaces it with a brand new black Chrysler 300 SRT8, a car strongly associated with gangster and drug culture, and even buys his son, Walter Jr., a new Dodge Challenger the same day. The $50 sale price was deliberately insulting to the car that had been his loyal companion, showing just how little value Heisenberg placed on Walter White's former existence. Fact 3. 3 Azteks were used in production. When you watch Breaking Bad and see Walter White's battered Pontiac Aztek taking hit after hit throughout the series, you might wonder how one vehicle could survive so much abuse. The answer is simple. It didn't. The production team actually used 3 separate Pontiac Azteks to bring Walter White's iconic ride to life, and each one served a very specific purpose during filming. The first Aztek was what's known in the film industry as the hero car, which is the main vehicle used for close-up shots and scenes where the car needed to look its best, or at least as good as a beat-up Aztek could look. This was the Aztek that appeared most frequently on screen and became the face of Walter White's downtrodden existence. After the show wrapped, this hero car found a permanent home on display at Sony Studios in Culver City, California, where it remains today as a piece of television history. The second Aztek served double duty as both a crash double and a parts car. In television and film production, crash doubles are vehicles used for stunts and action sequences that might damage the primary car. When the production needed parts or components to keep the hero car running and looking consistent, they could cannibalize this backup vehicle. The third Aztek was another crash double, and it saw some of the most intense action in the series. This was the vehicle used in the dramatic crash scene with Hank, where Walter intentionally steers into oncoming traffic to avoid taking his brother-in-law to the industrial laundry where the secret meth lab was hidden. The impact left this Aztek with severe rear-end damage, broken glass, and a completely smashed rear quarter panel that rendered it undrivable. After Breaking Bad ended this heavily damaged second crash, double went up for auction on October 8, 2013. Despite being little more than a prop with significant collision damage and no ability to run under its own power, the car sold for $7,800, proving that even a wrecked Aztek had value when it came with Breaking Bad's legendary status attached to it. Fact 4. Designed entirely on computers. The Pontiac Aztek holds a unique place in automotive history as one of the first cars ever designed entirely using computerized rapid prototyping and rapid visualization tools, which actually helps explain why it ended up looking so strange and boxy. Back in the late 1990s, when the Aztek was being developed, computer-aided design was still relatively new to the automotive industry, and designers were just beginning to explore what these digital tools could do. The problem was that what looked acceptable on a computer screen didn't always translate well to the real world, and the Aztek became a prime example of this disconnect between digital design and physical reality. When designers at General Motors were working on the Aztek, they relied heavily on these cutting-edge computer visualization programs to create and refine the vehicle's shape without building as many physical clay models as traditional car design required. This was supposed to speed up the development process and save money, but it came with an unexpected downside. The boxy, angular proportions that seemed interesting and futuristic on a computer monitor ended up looking awkward and ungainly when translated into an actual full-sized vehicle sitting on a showroom floor. The computer screens of that era simply couldn't capture how light, shadow, and three-dimensional space would interact with the design in the real world. Even more interesting is that some automotive historians and designers have pointed out that the Aztek's proportions appear as boxy as they do partly because the computerized design process made it easier to work with straight lines and sharp angles than the flowing curves that characterized more attractive vehicles of that time. The dashboard was designed by Johnson Controls and featured Pontiac's trademark red lighting scheme along with an optional heads-up display, showing that the technology inside the car was just as forward-thinking as the design process that created it. Unfortunately, being a pioneer in computer-based automotive design meant the Aztek became a cautionary tale about relying too heavily on digital tools without enough real-world verification during the design phase. Fact 5. Came with a tent and air mattress. One of the most unusual features of the real Pontiac Aztek was something that sounds almost too bizarre to be true, but it was absolutely real. You could buy an optional camping package that turned your SUV into a legitimate camper. This wasn't just some marketing gimmick either, as the package came with an actual tent that attached directly to the back of the vehicle and a two-person air mattress that included its own built-in pump. The tent connected to the Aztek using elastic straps that hooked around the rear fenders and inside the rear doors, and it featured a collapsible fiberglass rod that kept the whole structure popped out and stable. The setup was surprisingly well thought out. with windows on both sides that could be zipped down for ventilation and even an awning that provided shade during the day. According to people who actually used it, you could have the entire tent assembled and ready to sleep in within about 15 minutes, which made it genuinely practical for weekend camping trips or outdoor adventures. The air mattress that came with the camping package was engineered specifically to fit perfectly between the Aztek's rear wheel wells, and it even included special plastic caps called seat spring caps that slid over the springs underneath the second row seat to prevent punctures. The whole package cost around $195 when it was available, which sounds like a bargain for everything you got. Though today, these original GM camping kits are extremely rare and expensive when they do show up for sale. What makes this even more interesting is that while the Aztek was being absolutely destroyed by critics and car reviewers for being ugly and impractical, it actually offered this kind of genuine outdoor versatility that most other SUVs at the time couldn't match. The camping package perfectly captured what Pontiac was trying to do with the Aztek: create a vehicle for active, adventurous people, even if the execution and styling didn't quite land with buyers. Fact 6, named one of Time's worst inventions. The Pontiac Aztek didn't just make automotive history for being ugly, it actually made Time magazine's list of failures not once but twice, cementing its reputation as one of the most spectacular disasters in manufacturing history. In 2007, Time included the Aztek on their 50 worst cars of all time list, which was already a pretty harsh judgment considering how many terrible vehicles have been produced over the past century. But the magazine wasn't done with the Aztek yet. 3 years later, in 2010, Time went even further and placed the Pontiac Aztek on their 50 worst inventions list, right alongside genuinely dangerous or useless products that never should have existed in the first place. This second listing was particularly brutal because it wasn't just calling the Aztek a bad car anymore, it was calling it a bad invention, period. Time was essentially saying that the entire concept of the Aztek was so flawed that it ranked among humanity's worst ideas, putting it in the same category as things like New Coke, the Segway, and other products that became cultural punchlines. The magazine's 2001 article about the Aztek noted that although it was launched with the tagline, "quite possibly the most versatile vehicle on the planet," drivers had a completely different take on it, describing it as quite possibly the ugliest vehicle on the planet. What makes this double dishonor even more remarkable is that very few products have been singled out by Time magazine twice in this way. The Aztek managed to be so memorably terrible that it earned not just one spot of shame, but 2 separate acknowledgments of its failure from one of the world's most respected publications. For a vehicle that General Motors had hoped would revolutionize the crossover market and attract young, active buyers, these back-to-back recognitions from Time represented the complete opposite of the positive attention the company had been seeking when they greenlit the project. Fact 7. Topped ugliest car lists worldwide. The Pontiac Aztek didn't just fail to impress car buyers when it launched in the early 2000s. It became the poster child for automotive design disasters on a global scale. The Daily Telegraph, one of the United Kingdom's most respected newspapers, conducted a poll in August of 2008, asking readers to vote on the ugliest cars ever made. And the Aztek took the #1 spot on their list of the 100 ugliest cars of all time. This wasn't just a small survey either. Thousands of people participated, and the Aztek beat out decades' worth of questionable automotive designs to claim the dubious honor of being crowned the absolute worst. But the harsh criticism didn't just come from the media and the general public. Even General Motors' own leadership couldn't defend the vehicle's appearance. Bob Lutz, who served as vice chairman of General Motors and was known for his blunt, straight-talking style, famously described the Aztek and other GM vehicles from that era as looking like angry kitchen appliances. That quote perfectly captured what so many people felt when they first laid eyes on the Aztek. It had an aggressive, boxy front end with strange angles and plastic cladding that made it look more like a household appliance gone wrong than an actual vehicle meant for the road. The negative reception was so universal that other publications piled on as well. Edmunds.com, a trusted automotive research website, placed the Aztek at the top of their 100 worst cars of all time list, and they didn't hold back in their assessment. They wrote that the car didn't just fail because it was ugly, it actually destroyed an 84-year-old automaker, referring to how the Aztek's failure contributed to Pontiac's eventual demise. Time magazine got in on the action too, naming it one of the 50 worst cars ever made in 2007, and then going even further in 2010 by including it on their list of the 50 worst inventions of all time, putting it in the same category as failed products from completely different industries. Fact 8 became the Daytona 500 pace car. In February of 2001, just months after the Pontiac Aztek had been absolutely torn apart by critics and car enthusiasts for being one of the ugliest vehicles ever made, General Motors did something that shocked the automotive world. They selected a bright red Aztek to serve as the official pace car for the Daytona 500, which is NASCAR's most prestigious and widely watched race of the entire year. This was supposed to be a huge promotional opportunity for Pontiac to showcase their controversial new sport recreation vehicle to millions of racing fans, and the company's marketing team was incredibly optimistic about turning heads at the track. The Aztek pace car was given a special two-tone black and red paint scheme with official pace car graphics plastered across the sides, along with upgraded 18-inch Speedline wheels and high-performance Goodyear Eagle F1 tires to make it look more aggressive and racing-ready. Pontiac's brand manager at the time enthusiastically declared that NASCAR fans were active and versatile people who needed a vehicle that could keep up with them, and he promised they were going to turn more than a few heads when the Aztek brought the field to the green flag. Celebrity guest Frankie Muniz, who was starring in the hit TV show Malcolm in the Middle at the time, even rode in the Aztek pace car during the pre-race parade laps. However, what should have been a triumphant marketing moment for the struggling Aztek turned into something far more somber and tragic. The 2001 Daytona 500 became forever remembered as the race where legendary seven-time NASCAR champion Dale Earnhardt Sr. lost his life in a devastating final lap crash. The Pontiac Aztek pace car can even be seen in the background of footage showing the aftermath of the accident. Instead of being celebrated as a bold new vehicle leading America's premier racing series, the Aztek's appearance at Daytona became just another footnote in what was already shaping up to be one of the automotive industry's most spectacular failures. Fact 9. Designer also created the Corvette. Here's the thing that makes the Pontiac Aztek story even more surprising. The man who designed what many consider one of the ugliest cars ever made went on to create some of the most beautiful vehicles in automotive history. Tom Peters, the chief designer behind the Aztek, later became the lead designer for the 7th-generation Chevrolet Corvette, known as the C7, and also worked on the 8th-generation C8 Corvette, which completely revolutionized the iconic American sports car. The C7 Corvette, which debuted in 2013, received overwhelming praise from automotive journalists and car enthusiasts around the world for its aggressive, sculpted design and modern interpretation of classic Corvette styling cues. The car won numerous design awards and was considered by many to be one of the best-looking Corvettes ever produced. Then Peters worked on the C8 Corvette, which launched in 2020, featuring a radical mid-engine layout that transformed the Corvette into a true supercar competitor with stunning European-inspired styling that earned even more critical acclaim. So how did the same designer go from creating a vehicle that topped every ugliest car list to crafting sports cars that automotive magazines called works of art? The answer lies in the design process itself. When Peters was working on the Aztek in the late 1990s, his original concept was actually quite bold and interesting, featuring aggressive angles and a low, sporty stance that combined elements of the Pontiac Firebird and the Chevrolet Blazer. However, GM executives interfered heavily in the design process, forcing Peters to make the vehicle taller, narrower, and cheaper to produce by sharing a platform with GM's minivans. The result was a compromised design that lost all the appealing proportions of the original concept. with the Corvettes, Peters had much more creative freedom and proper resources to execute his vision without the same level of corporate interference, allowing his actual design talent to shine through. It just goes to show that even talented designers can produce disasters when forced to work under the wrong constraints. Fact 10. Started missing a wheel. From day one. From the very first moment we see Walter White's Pontiac Aztek in the pilot episode of Breaking Bad, the car is already in rough shape, and one detail that immediately stands out is the mismatched wheel on the driver's rear corner. The vehicle is missing one of its factory alloy wheels, and in its place sits a far less attractive replacement steel wheel that looks completely out of place with the rest of the car. This small but significant detail wasn't an accident or an oversight by the production team. It was a deliberate choice made to visually communicate Walter White's struggling financial situation and his overall sense of defeat before his transformation into Heisenberg even begins. The mismatched wheel serves as a perfect symbol of Walt's life at the start of the series, showing us that he's someone who can't even afford to properly maintain his vehicle and has to settle for the cheapest possible replacement part. It's the kind of thing that a person does when they're barely scraping by and every dollar counts, which perfectly captures where Walt is financially as an underpaid high school chemistry teacher working a second job at a car wash just to make ends meet. The detail also reinforces the idea that Walt has given up on appearances and has resigned himself to a life of mediocrity, driving around in a car that's not only widely considered one of the ugliest vehicles ever made, but is also in visibly poor condition with mismatched parts. What makes this detail even more effective is that it's something viewers notice immediately, but might not consciously think about until later when they realize just how intentional every visual choice in Breaking Bad really was. The steel wheel replacement stays on the Aztek throughout the series, serving as a constant reminder of where Walter White started and how far he's fallen even before his cancer diagnosis pushes him into the drug trade. It's one of those small touches that shows how much attention creator Vince Gilligan and his team paid to every aspect of the show's visual storytelling. Fact 11. Breaking Bad sparked a real sales revival. The Pontiac Aztek had been dead and buried for years, widely considered one of the biggest automotive failures in history. But then something absolutely wild happened. After Breaking Bad became a cultural phenomenon in the early 2010s, young people suddenly started buying up used Azteks like crazy. In 2015, automotive research company Edmunds released data showing that the Aztek had climbed all the way to number 6 on the list of most popular used cars purchased by buyers aged 18 to 34. This was a car that dealers couldn't give away just a few years earlier, and now millennials were actively seeking them out. Edmunds analysts directly credited what they called the Breaking Bad effect for this unexpected comeback. Jeremy Acavito, an analyst with Edmunds, described it as one of those quirky purchases that the younger generation was becoming known for. The show had somehow transformed the Aztek from a punchline into a symbol of cool rebellion. Fans of the series weren't just buying the cars because they were cheap, although affordability certainly played a role. They were buying them because Walter White drove one, and Breaking Bad had reached such iconic status that people wanted to own a piece of that world. The resurgence was so strong that it became a topic of mainstream news coverage, with outlets like NBC News and Inverse Magazine running stories about how young buyers were scooping up Azteks specifically because of their connection to the show. Some automotive journalists speculated that the show's popularity might have even driven up resale values slightly, though the cars were still selling for well below what most used vehicles cost. The phenomenon proved that pop culture influence could actually reverse decades of negative perception and turn one of the most mocked vehicles in automotive history into something desirable. Walter White's humble crossover had achieved something that Pontiac's entire marketing department never could. It made the Aztek relevant again and even gave it a strange kind of street credibility that no one saw coming. Fact 12. Highest customer satisfaction. Despite ugliness. Here's something that might blow your mind about the Pontiac Aztek. While basically everyone agreed it was one of the ugliest vehicles ever created, the people who actually owned and drove these things absolutely loved them. In 2001, the same year the Aztek launched to widespread ridicule and mockery, it won the award for Most Appealing Entry Sport Utility Vehicle from J.D. Power and Associates, which is one of the most respected independent consumer survey organizations in the automotive industry. Even more surprising, the Aztek scored among the highest customer satisfaction index scores in its entire class, beating out competitors that were far better looking and more popular. J.D. Power even went on record explaining this bizarre contradiction, noting that the Aztek scores highest or second highest in every APL component measure except exterior styling. So what this means is that in terms of comfort, functionality, features, reliability, interior design, and pretty much everything else that matters, when you're actually using a vehicle day to day, Aztek owners were thrilled with their purchase. It was literally only the outside appearance that dragged down the vehicle's reputation. The people who bought Azteks weren't swayed by what everyone else thought the car looked like, because they were too busy enjoying all the practical benefits it offered, like the massive cargo space, the clever storage solutions, the removable cooler, the versatile seating configurations, and all those innovative features that Pontiac had packed into the vehicle. This created one of the strangest situations in automotive history, where a car could simultaneously be considered a complete failure by the general public and the automotive press, while the actual customers who owned them were among the most satisfied buyers in the market. It turns out that the Aztek's biggest problem wasn't that it was a bad vehicle. It was just that it was so shockingly ugly that most people never got past the appearance to discover everything else it had to offer. Fact 13. Test audiences hated it before production. Before the Pontiac Aztek ever rolled off the assembly line, General Motors had a pretty clear warning that something was seriously wrong with their new vehicle design. The head of product development, a man named Don Hackworth, presented the Aztek concept car to a market research group to get their feedback, and the response was absolutely brutal. The focus group participants made it crystal clear that they hated the way the car looked, with criticism pouring in from nearly everyone who saw it. This wasn't just a few people expressing mild concerns or suggesting minor tweaks. The overwhelming majority of the test audience flat out rejected the design primarily because of its appearance. But here's where things get truly bizarre. Despite receiving this mountain of negative feedback from potential customers, Hackworth simply chose to ignore every single criticism and pushed forward with the original design completely unchanged. There were no attempts to address the concerns, no redesigns to make the vehicle more appealing, and no effort whatsoever to incorporate what the focus groups were telling them. General Motors executives essentially decided that they knew better than the very people they were hoping would buy the car, adopting an attitude of, "Those ignorant people just don't understand what we're creating." This decision to completely disregard customer feedback turned out to be a massive mistake that perfectly illustrated what was wrong with General Motors' corporate culture at the time. The company had developed such a closed-minded approach to product development that they were willing to dismiss real consumer opinions in favor of their own internal vision. When the production model finally debuted at the 2000 Detroit Auto Show, the public reaction was even worse than the focus groups had predicted. Automotive journalist Dan Neal, who witnessed the unveiling, later described how the audience actually gasped when they saw the vehicle, saying the car couldn't have been more instantly hated if it had a swastika tattooed on its forehead. The Aztek went on to become one of the most legendary failures in automotive history, proving that those test audiences had been right all along. Fact 14. The windshield broke. Multiple times. If there's one thing that perfectly captured Walter White's chaotic descent into the criminal underworld, it was the condition of his Pontiac Aztek's windshield, which seemed to attract destruction like a magnet throughout the entire series. In fact, that windshield was broken and replaced so many times during Breaking Bad's run that it became almost a running joke among fans, and each time it shattered, it represented another moment where Walt's carefully controlled life spiraled further out of control. The first major windshield incident happened in the Season 2 finale when the mid-air collision between Wayfarer Flight 515 and a chartered plane sent burning debris raining down on the White family residence. When pieces of wreckage crashed into Walt's Aztek, they completely shattered the windshield, leaving it cracked and broken. What made this moment particularly memorable was Walt's reaction when he was later pulled over by a police officer for driving with the damaged windshield. Instead of calmly accepting the citation, Walt completely lost it and screamed at the officer, yelling, "Hellfire rained down on my house," in a dramatic outburst that led to him being pepper sprayed and arrested right there on the spot. But that was far from the only time the windshield met a violent end. During a heated argument between Walter and Jesse Pinkman, Jesse picked up a large chunk of cement from a broken curb and hurled it directly through the windshield in a moment of pure rage. Then came one of the show's most intense scenes when Walt deliberately drove the Aztek into two rival drug dealers who were about to kill Jesse, severely damaging the front end and breaking the windshield for the third time. And if that wasn't enough punishment for one vehicle, Walt later intentionally steered his car into oncoming traffic to avoid taking Hank to the industrial laundry where the secret meth lab was hidden, which resulted in yet another shattered windshield and major damage to the back end. Despite all this abuse, Walt's mechanic Benny kept fixing the car and even told Walt it still had a few 100,000 miles left in it. Fact 15, sold only 119,000 in 5 years. When General Motors first unveiled the Pontiac Aztek, they had sky-high expectations for what they believed would be a revolutionary vehicle that would reshape the crossover market. The company confidently predicted they would sell 75,000 Azteks every single year, banking on the idea that young, adventurous Generation X buyers would flock to this bold new design. They needed to sell at least 30,000 units annually just to break even on their investment, so 75,000 seemed like a reasonable target that would generate solid profits. But reality had very different plans for the ambitious crossover. Over the entire 5-year production run from 2001 through 2005, Pontiac managed to sell only about 119,000 Azteks total. To put that in perspective, their best year was 2002 when they moved fewer than 28,000 units, which was still well below their annual sales target and barely enough to break even. The first year was particularly brutal, with only about 27,000 Azteks finding buyers when GM had projected nearly 3 times that number. These dismal sales figures meant the Aztek failed to come anywhere close to justifying its development costs or production expenses. The reasons for this spectacular failure went beyond just the polarizing design that people either loved or hated. The Aztek was priced significantly higher than competing vehicles in its class, making it too expensive for the young Generation X buyers it was specifically designed to attract. A base model started around $22,000, which was roughly $5,000 more than what it should have cost to be competitive in the market. After the disappointing first year, Pontiac desperately slashed prices by nearly 20% and offered extremely generous rebates and cut-rate financing. But the damage to the vehicle's reputation was already done. By the time production ended in late 2004, the Aztek had cemented its place as one of the biggest automotive failures in modern history, ultimately contributing to the decline and eventual discontinuation of the entire Pontiac brand itself.